I'm Ceri Matthews from Treborth, North Swansea.
Ah, that's where I grew up.
Did you?
Well, for 5 years. Yes, Winter Court in Treborth.
Where's that?
It's, I can't remember.
It's only
We
5.
moved when I was 5, yeah.
Right, so, Treborth. Well, when I was a kid, there it was Welsh speaking, so it's what I still regard as the sort of Welsh speaking part of Swansea. And even though I think by now, probably all the old people who spoke the native dialect, there's one left, I know. So there must be 5 or 6 only people left who speak like the language that I grew up hearing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
The particular form of which people call Welsh. I didn't even think of it as that. It was just the language of the village, you know. But then, and then in a wider context, Morriston, that part of town, you know. So that language is. And then I moved away. I went to art college, and then I moved away from Swansea when I was 18. So I come back now, and I come back to a place that's different because the language is effectively not there anymore. Only memories of it now. But those memories are very much bound up in the place, in the geology, the physicalness of the place, because the buildings keep changing. Same with town. Everything keeps changing, but everything stays the same as well. So I think that's my worldview.
Yeah, some of those place names and street names, they're quite helpful, aren't they? I know that my grandparents lived in Brynhyfryd.
Yes.
And I do remember there being one last cottage.
Right.
Because there were quite a lot of farms.
Yeah.
And my grandfather telling me that one of them was thatched once.
Right.
In
Brynhyfryd, I know it.
Brynhyfryd. Ah, there we are. So it had a Welsh name.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a
do you know what it means?
It's got a tune. Yes.
It hasn't got a tune.
Yeah. And a screch
what does it mean?
A screch is a jay.
Jay, the bird. The bird.
And allt is the southern Welsh word for woods, for a wood. Allt in the north of Wales means a hill, and allt in South Wales means a wood.
So you know that.
Jay wood.
And my grandfather saying there were farms.
Yeah. And in Treborth as well. You see, Treborth was so fascinating. I keep banging on about this because it was industrial and rural at the same time. Swansea was. Yeah. And the sea.
Yeah.
So you've got everything. Everything was here, you know.
Yeah.
And so the whole world came here, literally, because of what Swansea had done, because of the copper industry. But that was, we were just talking about this morning, the copper works, first copper works in Swansea, in Landor. It's not even Landor, it's just by Brynhyfryd, between the football pitch and Brynhyfryd Square. Yeah,
all that water coming down.
There's 2 streams, the Nant Strid-y-Filiast and Nant Cwngeli meet there.
Yeah.
And there was a corn mill there called Melyn Caergynydd. I'm repeating myself now. There was a corn mill there, Melyn Caergynydd. Cynydd being the tutelar spirit of Peninsula Gower, you know, Saint Cynydd.
Yes, I do.
As in Llangennydd.
Yeah.
So Caergynydd was in, I think, when Arlwydd Way. But Melyn Caergynydd, where all the corn was grown, the wheat was grown for the town, was there. And in 1717, so it was a corn mill, driven by a water wheel, driven by Nant Cwngeli, and Nant Strid-y-Filiast. And then in 1717, they started, the entrepreneurs started the Llangebelach Copper Works in Melyn Caergynydd. They just renamed it.
Right.
The Llangebelach Copper Works. They built the first modern copper works there. And at first it was driven by the same water of Nant Cwngeli. So you've got the industry on top.
Dangerous place as well. That must have been with all that water and.
Oh, it's only a little stream.
Okay.
It's a tiny little stream.
Yeah.
But it's got a drop.
I'm thinking of the coal. Yeah.
Well, the coal comes to the surface there.
Yeah.
The 4 and 5 seams, the 4 and 5, the 5 and the 6 come to the surface there. And it was the right sort of coal, so they built the copper works there. The first reverberatory chambers, the modern method, 1717. So there's that continuity there, which takes you right back to not even the Middle Ages, the Age of Saints. It's like Saint Cynydd. And that stream is the boundary between Cyfelach and Llangower, the valley in modern terms, and Peninsula Gower, the Gower, in modern terms, and that's Cynnydd. So you have these two saints, you know.
Yeah.
And the bluff that's there, Trwyddfa, that was seriously important place. Wyddfa, as in Wyddfa in Snowdon, it means place of sight. And it was there that, again, I'm repeating, we did, we were talking about Thomas Hopkyn Bainan, who was a medieval king who Owain Glyndŵr came to for advice about, but because he was an educated man, he had books by philosophers and things like that. He came to him, he had a library, and also, but his plas, so his scriptorium was in Ynysforgan, but his plas was on Trwyddfa. And you go there and you can see the sea.
So I know of him, but I didn't really.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I mean, I'm putting two and two together here for the Trwyddfa
he was like
thing.
a seer as well, wasn't he? Yeah.
So you put this information together and you build up a picture. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier on, John, like where, so for me, this is how I, tunes become revealed to me, is through this process.
I see.
So it doesn't say anywhere about nobody ties the fact Thomas Hopkyn Bainan was a seer, was a political advisor, commissioned the Red Book of Mabinogi, Cilwch and Olwen, all these things, where he lived. Nobody seems to have added two and two together. The fact that it's called Trwyddfa.
I've read of him being associated with Gower. That's
historic Gower, i.e. from Abercraf to Llangennych.
Yeah, of course.
And we were talking again earlier on, if you're in, it's really weird, I'm repeating everything, but we were in on the two tunes that we learned earlier on, Mynydd Gelli Wastad and we talked about Mynydd Drummer. Yeah. So they are the two horizons that he would have known, that Mynydd Drummer is the eastern horizon where the sun would have risen, and Mynydd Gelli Wastad the western where the sun would have set, you know, and so Ynysforgan is in between these places, and that's how I read these melodies are things that I read, and that you
between places,
and it's circumstantial evidence, if you like,
but
it's undeniable that this is the thing. But because people are so dependent on written factual information, they can't make those connections anymore.
No,
and that's why I've come across the fact that this place is so rich in music, Swansea specifically, because it's a big industrial town. And yet it has this hinterland of unique hinterland. It's betwixt and between. It's not Dyfed, it's not Gwent, it's Gwyr, you know.
It was certainly an important place for the early saints.
Yeah, right.
Definitely.
Right.
I find it interesting as well, what you say about betwixt and between. So the songs. Do you feel like they just come to you as you read the landscape?
Yes. And it's a question of tuning into them.
Yeah,
they're there.
Literally.
They're there. It's like finding a fact about somewhere. And then you go, oh, and then once you found out that fact, it's always, then that's always a fact. It's a fact that there are two big coal seams under here. That's just a fact. But you most of the people who live here are only vaguely aware of coal. They don't know that the coal seams have actually made all the folds that they walk over, that the streams that were carved out by the ice, so it becomes, it unfolds, the layers unfold slowly, and you have to be interested in, let's say, coal for that to be meaningful to you. In the same way, you have to be interested in tunes, and the tunes are there, but you won't find a book of them. And the people, the authorities, whose job it is to protect knowledge, deny that there's this thing because it's out of their scope. It's that thing of we don't really talk about it because it's not been proven yet, and it's not the
the meaning is perhaps in the stories.
Yeah.
And the stories come from the landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's symbiotic. I think it's both ways.
Yeah, and for me, the place names describe a landscape.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. and
And
their
Treborth,
clues.
coming back to Treborth then, it's a sign that tre is the old word for farm, and porth, not boith, poith, it's porth. It means hot, so there was a smelting, a pre-industrial smelt there, even when the place was named as Treborth, and Pentraporth in Morriston the same.
Okay.
So the porth is a sign that it was some kind of smelting going on, possibly copper even, but there's no copper here, so I don't know what they would have been smelting. Although there is, you know more than me, I think there's ancient evidence of copper smelting in Gower as well.
Yeah, and it's what you say, it's the coal, isn't it?
Yes.
So they're bringing the copper to the coal.
Absolutely.
Because we had the coal, and as you also said, the right sort of coal.
Yeah. And the funny thing is then, on top of the poetic thing, is that on top of that copper is a connector. It's an absolute, as a conduit for things, both historically as well as actually, and poetically, and everythingly. And so it connected the town with the world and itself, deep down into itself as well.
It's those early explorations around Cape Horn.
Yes.
It's my relatives came over from Ireland to work in those copper works.
Did they?
They did. Labourers. Yeah. Did you?
I had an Anchor Smith, a Keegan, come over from some.
Right. There was massive.
I suppose you'd expect to see that if there's a family from Swansea, you'd expect to see in the family tree.
Yeah.
Converging on Swansea on Mumbles, otherwise you wouldn't be there, would you?
It's magnetising people to itself.
Cornwall, Devon.
All those incursions over the sea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Trade.
Absolutely.
Influence, looking for the Romans, looking for on Mumbles Hill. They're looking for those raw materials, aren't they? Metals.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And it's ironic that the metals were brought here then, because of the silver and tin was brought here, and copper because of the coal. It's the coal which itself causes the shape of Swansea. Otherwise it would be flat, right? So it's the underground undulations where my grandfather worked. He was a miner, Mynydd Newydd in Clays, in Mynydd Bach. So he worked the contours that he crawled through, and so by then they sank a shaft. The shaft is in Penlan, so they'd walk up to Penlan,
big coal seam.
Yeah, then go down, and then he'd crawl, back again under the undulations, which absolutely must have mirrored the surface that he walked on as well, and in fact the stream, Cwmgelli stream, follows the contours of the coal, and so it's like, but we've got the bay, so there's these two things. Otherwise it'd be Merthyr, or
one thing I've noticed, Ceri, as we've been talking about place names over the last couple of years, I suppose, and tune names, is that historians are very cautious, aren't they, about reaching conclusions about place names and linking them to events in history. But it doesn't bother musicians. No. They're quite happy to stake a claim or to use it to make some kind of political point about the music or the movement that they happen to be a part of. There seems to be a difference there. They'll say, oh, this is a such and such tune, or this belongs to this tradition, or this belongs to that, or this is derived from here. They're quite happy to make quite bold.
Well, you do
claims,
be bound to as an artist. So I'm an artist, right?
Yeah.
Painter. So I studied here in Swansea with the greatest art teacher ever, Pat Briggs, who taught us how to observe the world. But the first thing she taught us was we were artists. So an artist can use science, whereas it seems a scientist is reluctant to use art. That's what you've just described. So as an artist, you can use all the science you like, you can use all the maths you like, but you observe. So at that level, it's the scientific method. But then you must mark it. You have to put an opinion on it. Whereas a scientist refuses to put an opinion on it. They don't come to any conclusions, except they do nowadays. But properly, the scientific method is there is no. It's not. Whereas with a painter, you make a conclusion. That's what your mark is.
Yeah.
So if you think that leaf is going there, well, you're the artist. You make that mark. So those marks are the tunes, and then at this point, imagination comes into it because. So imagination comes into the scientific method. Well, I wonder why this happens. You imagine something and you seek to prove it. It's different with art, but because with art, so art exists out of time. It's not a temporal activity. And so when we play tunes, this is why we learn them by ear as well. You commit them to memory, so you commit them to the past. But then you have to fetch them out of your past to play them. So you put them in your past, and then when it comes to play it, you have to imagine the next note that's in front of you. It's in your memory, it's in your past, but you're going into the note, which is always in the next note is always in the future. So you have imagination. You're constantly stuck between them in the now when you're playing these tunes, and so. The whole thing of a scientist wouldn't do that going into the tune analogy, part of the analogy. They wouldn't go into the tune. They're happy with their description of what they see as the facts up to that point. Whereas if you're an artist, you must go into the tune.
Yeah.
And so you've got to go into imagination, and at that point, lies are part of the truth at that point.
Yeah. It's like in a kind of, you have your own kind of imagined kind of folk kind of work, your own imagined mythology, don't you?
I'm
Around
going to say
the tunes
ancestral.
that you,
Yes, it's both.
and those associations that you have with the tunes, because I mean, Ceri, you said you said there's like 600 tunes you could be choosing from to teach us any given.
It's more than
week.
a druid.
Yeah, well, yeah. How long did you have to sit in a cave memorising those?
Yeah.
But for the ones to stick, if that association could be through a place name, for example, Bracelet Bay, that particular tune, and there could be any kind of that might just be your name for it. For all I know, if we don't know, if there's no kind of record, it could, but. That doesn't matter because that's the association and the image that I've got when I'm playing it. Exactly. That's why it's stuck, and it could be that you just associate it perhaps with people.
You see, we feel obliged to move within the scientific realm because of the age we live in, right?
Yeah. Provenance, frankly, they seem to want, don't they? People seem to want provenance. If you play a tune, and people will come up to you and say, "Well, you didn't say where that one was from."
People have lost this understanding, right? So they're dependent then on authority.
Yeah.
And whereas if you're an artist, you are not dependent on authority. You're dependent on actuality as it's happening. You're in the now always, and so. But accidentally, you open the floodgates for historical, scientific, analytical fact. It just comes in, but it's your raw material at that point, and it's like being a grown up and not a child. It's
or a charlatan,
and I'm very down on the whole scientific method because it's so easily corruptible and bought, and all the rest of it. So. And it doesn't do the grown-up thing of having a contradiction or a paradox that you can hold for like 20 years and then it'll resolve. So people keep saying, "Where's this from? I want to know where this comes from, and show me." No.
Yeah.
Well,
or even correcting or you've been trying to, people will.
Well, I've been trying to present an alternative way of looking at tunes, and then the accidental thing is then you're surrounded by them. You just the people that are too dumb to hear them. Yeah. Literally. If not dumb, deaf to hear them.
There are very few tunes, aren't there, that are unique to one place or even.
There's no such thing. I think.
Many incursions on
there's
one
not
landscape.
many that that's just. I mean, things. It's just things that have all come out of associations between people, like Gower Wassail. How that's ended up being a kind of unique version is down to individual kind of individual people in their contact, isn't it? It was Thomas Lloyd and Phil Tanner.
Exactly.
But the ones in Swansea, you said, are just because of the where they've been recorded. They happen to happen to have them. It just happens.
We have this conversation in music, but we don't really have it in painting. Like if Picasso paints Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, right, which he did. Nobody said he's ripped off Delacroix. Nobody said he's just doing, it's just Delacroix painted that. It's French, it's not Spanish. It's like this thing only exists in music, and it also only really exists in folk music, especially traditional music. It's a form of fascism. It's basically fascistic thought. That this is I mean, Hitler was very fond of that method of it's a German idea anyway. Not all Germans are fascists, but it's a particularly German idea. The folk song, Herder invented it. It comes out of botany. Again, it comes out of science. So Gottfried von Herder applied Linnaeus's scientific method of botany to culture. And then he came up with the Volkslied. And then he came up with classification of place, time, people, and all the rest of it. It's a historical thing that happened. The people who were singing those things had absolutely zero interest in any of that at all. They were poets. And I think this is important to say as well, is that each time you play the tune, you're the composer of the tune, you're the poet, you're the person who's seeing it for the first time, and you have a responsibility to play it as well as you can. And that's all it is, really. And you can't play it, it's too big for you to play. We were saying to John earlier on, you'll never learn these tunes. None of the tunes we learned looking at, we will ever learn. Because there'll be a phrase that goes da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, and you may want to go da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, or you may want to go da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, or da-dee-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, or da-da.
It's like the intonation in language, though, isn't it? So everything you said. So when I've said, we're collating dialect words, what does that mean? Well, good question.
Yes.
And where do they come from? Very good question again. Well, that can't be a mumbles word because I've heard that word in Somerset. Exactly.
Yes.
So that's the fluidity and magic of it, and you're trying to capture these little moments, just because they're a description of times past or times changing, not because you think you're going to come up with a definitive
absolutely
thing.
There are no definitive.
There seems to be an obsession as well with going back, though, looking for those moments and looking for and almost like doing the equivalent of battle reenactments. Trying to and then pickling it in aspic and saying this is the approved version, and any variance from this approved version is, I mean, it helps with sessions. I can understand. There's a practical reason for doing it. But to think of it as kind of preserving some kind of heritage. To go back to Phil Tanner, because that's kind of the thing that I look more into, is that the songs that he was singing were just popular songs, not necessarily of his day, but from the most immediate from the last, not more than 150 years probably before he was about, and from a lot of them from Scotland. Sides written or from London, off the stage, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So I don't think he was necessarily thinking he was preserving a tradition.
No, it's the people who pickled Phil in aspic that thought that. It's Winfried von Thomas and the BBC and people who wanted, fascists again, who wanted an Gowerian who exemplified some eternal Gower-ness, Anglophone, and then you've got the opposite. Everybody who speaks English in Gower is obviously foreign, Welsh thing, and you're both completely and utterly wrong. It's like a mad mix of accidental historical events that have made this place, which is unique because it's a peninsula.
Yes.
It's like, so it has, you know, Swansea at the top end of it, the peninsula does. But the rest is the sea. So you've next stop Valparaiso. You know, it's like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
or wherever, isn't it? South Australia.
And it's that perspective, though, isn't
it's
it?
Cork.
Cork, yeah.
Stop Cork. We used to sit in the pilot thinking, oh,
next stop Cork.
could be in Cork, couldn't we? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably the closest.
Aye.
You were saying that's probably close. That was closer to Swansea in some ways than other places in Wales.
Yeah, and then contradictorily, not because there's no Welsh in Cork and there's plenty of Welsh in Llanfair Ceredigion. So, you know, again, it's always judge the moment, isn't it? And see what it's saying to you, really.
An interesting character that you mentioned before, Thomas Lloyd, and I think he's overlooked because I certainly didn't know about him until you.
No, well, again, that's putting two together.
Yeah.
Because Phil talks about Tom Lloyd, Morriston Tom, he calls him.
Yeah.
So you find out who Morriston Tom is Tom Lloyd, fiddler, son of another fiddler called Tom Lloyd from Kilgetty. So Tom Lloyd came, and then he was a job-in fiddler. It was his job, his grandfather's job. So we can surmise then that he travelled around. He lived in sort of Kilgetty, and he travelled around the old Dyfed, Cardiganshire, Carmarthenshire, Pembrokeshire. English speaking, Welsh speaking, and a lot of Irish people there as well. And English people. So where did his tune come from? Everywhere. They came from everywhere.
Yeah.
But they also came from there, whatever that means. In other words, the thing that we call the Welsh harp tradition. So he had that, which was less strong here, it seems, in Swansea. Neath, full-on Welsh harp tradition. Swansea, pianos. It didn't seem to be, because the Welsh harp is a Baroque instrument, the triple harp's a Baroque instrument. Piano is slightly later Baroque instrument, right? And here they chose pianos, Neath they chose harps. And that's that. And then, but Pembrokeshire, he seems to be playing tunes that people have labelled and identified and classified as traditional Welsh harp music. Of course, there's no such thing. So the tune, for instance, I think that John's alluding to, is a tune called Calennig. It's a harp tune, and it was written down in a book by Edward Jones, I think. So then it's definitely a harp tune. It's proof. But anyway, the tune obviously had many variants, one of which Tom Lloyd the elder played, one of which must have been played by Tom Lloyd Jr. because he taught it to Phil Tanner, who uses it as the tune for the Gower Wassail. We've got there. So the harp goes dan dee dan la la dan dee da dee dan dan dee 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 da dee dee dan dee da do da 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 dee da 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 dum dan da dee da 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 dee dee dan la do da 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 dee dan dan la do dan dee da dan. And we all know the Gower Wassail goes, we know by the moon that we are not too soon. So it's put in English, it's had words put to it. That makes the tune behave differently to what it is on a harp. Got the triple harp thing there. And then, this is the mysterious bit. So it must have been some kind of putting together by the two of them, I think, because the tune doesn't exist seemingly in the West Country. They use major tunes that are completely different. And in second place, so a lot of the words are obviously West Country, but then he goes into that bit, we know by the moon we are not too soon, we know by the ground we are in sound. That is Cywydd Daear Byrion. That form of writing is medieval Welsh that died out. But the last place it died out in was, guess where, Glamorganshire, South Glamorganshire, but obviously including West Gower too, possibly, South Pembrokeshire, because that's where Kilgetty, that's where Tom Lloyd was from. And it's a form of poetry that goes dee rhyme, 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 dee new rhyme, new rhyme, dee new rhyme, new rhyme. The rhyme keeps changing. We know by the moon we are not too soon. We know by the ground we are within sound. We know by the stars we are not too far. I can't remember all of them, but so suddenly what's happening? Like Phil is singing ancient Welsh stuff. So who translated it? Faye couldn't speak Welsh, as far as I know. Perhaps he could. Who knows? Perhaps he just said he couldn't. He was hanging around Swansea all the time, the market, full of Welsh speakers, you know. I don't know. I certainly probably didn't have enough Welsh to be able to translate with Diane Billion into beautiful English poetry. But somebody could have. What happened there? I've no idea. Then you've got Tom Lloyd's tune coming in.
Yeah.
Then you've got the Gower Wassail. This thing then that's suddenly a massive edifice that nobody's allowed to touch.
Yeah.
Because Phil did it.
Yeah.
And Wilfred Vaughan Thomas recorded him for the BBC. And then, you know, Cecil Sharp and all these, you know, people come along and absolutely stamp it as their thing.
And I found a copy of the Gower Wassail in a Victorian book written by a vicar in Llanmaddock.
Right. Ooh.
And it differs.
What differs?
I'd have to compare
the tune or the words?
Only the words are in the book.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Different.
See, people are continually inventing. That's your job as an artist. That's your job. And your job is to re-express the feeling that you've had at hearing or seeing or feeling something, communicate into a person, and as honestly and as truthfully as you can, giving them that experience, you know. And to do that, somebody said to me once, he said, he's an English bloke who'd moved to Wales, and he said, why do Irish tunes sound like Ireland looks, but Welsh tunes don't sound like Wales looks? That was a genuine Burmese question. In other words, Wales...
Hear the Brummie accent, see if it makes
well, yeah, the black country. Why does Wales look... Why does Ireland look like it sounds and Wales looks different to what it sounds? Something like that, he said, you know. And what he meant was, you know, you've got this feeling, you're walking out in the countryside, right, or even in the town, you've got a feeling, and then how is that expressed in musically? It was expressed on a harp, always, or a choir. Like, that's it, right? You're not allowed to express it in any other way because we're Welsh, and this is the Welsh way of express. This is how it is. Whereas in Ireland, see, they never bothered them, and so they expressed it as honestly and as truthfully as they could every time. So if somebody doesn't like the way a tune goes, they change it because it doesn't feel right. It's not given the right. So in Ireland, like in Wales, most of the tunes came from England, but they didn't feel right. They didn't have that.
So their criteria then for selecting a new tune to learn or to become part of their repertoire would be it's a good tune and it fits in and there's something they like about the tune that appeals to them, like
and can express something through,
and they can do something with it rather than I'll do this one because I can add this because I can definitely say it's Welsh.
It's an example of
that's their way of doing it. Is that?
I think so, and I think in Ireland they know that every fiddler knows she's the composer of the tune, but they would never say that. I wouldn't be saying that. No, it's like because don't get above yourself either. But everybody knows that's, and they also know that Toft, when he plays the tune, he does that little thing. Oh, that's lovely. I wish I could get that, and that's the level of activity that they're at, really. It's like real detail, like how's he do that? I want that. And then you get it one day, and then you put it in all your stuff as well, and then it moves, and it's not like what's the right way to do it. It's what's the best way to do it, and that seems to be the difference. Relax, you know. And we've I think because of Stockholm syndrome, political aware identity, all these accidental things that have happened. There's a class of people in Wales whose job it is to maintain cultural purity, you know.
Fairly early on, when you were teaching us the tunes, and I've been calling them Swansea. Just because I
probably made you do that. I don't know.
There was an American couple on their way to the station, just stuck their heads through the door, and I can't remember whether they said something like, "Gee, is this Welsh music?" And you said, "No, it's Swansea."
Did I?
Yeah, you said, "No, it's Swansea music." Anyway, but I think I was thinking, well, that's my interpretation of that is Swansea music there and then.
Yeah.
At that. Because we are sitting on High Street in Swansea. That was my interpretation.
Yeah.
I don't know if.
I don't know, John. I don't know what I think really. I'm finding my way through the tunes.
That's kind of.
Yeah, without being proscribed and without being a fascist. I keep saying that word.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't want to. Went to school. It was like that. I went to every experience, and it's like, hang on, I'm not going to be told this. So you try and what my art teacher told me was that you break it. The first thing you do is you break it, and then you put it together again.
Deconstruct it all. I mean, I suppose in some ways working in heritage now, a lot of the time I want to push against the traditional ideas of Swansea in particular, that we all like rugby and that we all do, you know, those two. And then I also have to question whether I'm being contrary or whether I'm trying to work out exactly what I do think. And I know that the one thing that's come out for me is that, enhanced my interest in the place names, that it's been influenced by so many different things for such a long time. And, and I look at place names in Llanryddion, Spring Llanryddion, back in the Gan from Lake Area, and I think, they look like Norse names. They look like Norse words to me. Wow. You know, what does that tell me about a story? And then I start making connections that aren't scientific.
No.
And I come up with a whole story that makes sense to me. You know. So from that point of view, I think I understand what you mean about the tunes.
But sometimes you don't know, do you? And then you just say, somebody will say, well, where's that come from? What's it about? And sometimes they're not, and sometimes the answer is I just like it.
Yeah. So it's not about preserving, it's about exploring them.
It's about making things new. And you can only work with what you got. You can't invent a new colour. You've only got those colours, and then we can mix them and you can use them. If I wanted to paint those, green leaves, well, they're not green, are they, right? So if I wanted to paint that, you never could, but you'd start with blue, yellow and red, and you'd work your way towards those colours, right? And then, there's no definitive way of painting that thing there. It's too complicated. And so that's a historical situation. You approach it in the same way. You have what you have, your three colours, and then you put them where you think best. And that's the approach. It's as simple as that. It's other people who project onto it.
I think that's we study the history of blue quite a lot. Just that simple thing.
Who studies that?
I do it with schools. It's one of our projects. The history of the colour blue.
Yeah, right.
From different
Lapis
perspectives.
lazuli, cobalt.
Exactly.
As in glass, meaning green.
In Welsh,
It's fascinating.
And then meaning changing.
Yeah.
And for a while, not knowing and forgetting how blue was made and things like that.
And you put them all paintings had blue in them because the rich people were buying it.
And the class. So many different aspects to one word.
It's brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ceri.